You're listening to the Work-Life Equation, the Bright Horizons Family Matters podcast for busy working families. Whether you're a working mom, a dad, or busy parent also caring for other family members, we've got tips for how to fit jobs and families together and for how to make your work-life equation add up. I'm Lisa Oppenheimer, and on today's show, we're looking back at a conversation we had with our good friend Stu Friedman. Stu is the head of the Work-Life Integration Project at the University of Pennsylvania's Wharton School, as well as host of his own radio show and one of today's leading voices on the subject of work-life challenges. He talked to us about his book, Leading the Life You Want, and the difficult task we all have today of trying to find success on the job and off.
Stu, welcome. Thank you so much for joining the Bright Horizons community today. I'm so happy to say you and I have spoken several times before, and I'm really happy to have you here.
It's great to be here, Lisa. Thanks to you, and thanks to everybody for tuning in.
Now, before we get started, I'd like to tell our listeners how they can follow along with you. You have a Twitter handle, correct?
I do indeed. It's Stu Friedman. It's at Stu Friedman, STEWFRIEDMAN, and love to have you follow.
As a professor at the Wharton School, Stu has had a lot of conversations with students about their desire to balance work and life. And he started our conversation by explaining why balance is impossible.
Okay, so can I start out with a basic question? So we talk a lot about the term work-life balance. But you say that we've got that all wrong, that we should get rid of the word balance and replace it with something that's more realistic. So can you tell me about what that something is and why?
Sure, yes. That picture I just want to mention is 27 and a half years old. So that picture of me and my son, who actually now lives in Boston, was when he was born in October 1987. And that moment of his arrival really changed everything in my life and my career as I began to think about really nothing else other than what I was going to do to try to make the world a safe one for him to grow up in. And I brought that topic into my MBA classroom at Wharton and had a great discussion with students that day who were very eager to learn more about what they were going to be doing as business leaders and as people to try to shape the world in a way that would enable them to be the kinds of parents they wanted to be, to really be the kinds of people they wanted to be in the different parts of their lives. And that's what really kind of kicked all this off and resulted in my founding the Work-Life Integration Project at Wharton in 1991 and focusing not on balance, to get back to your question here, but to think instead in terms of integration or harmony. So the basic issue here is that when you think in terms of balance, you naturally think of those scales, right? Where, like the scales of justice, and the goal is to try to keep them in perfect equilibrium. The problem with that is that nobody can do that. It's impossible. I don't know anyone who has perfect balance. And that indeed when you are thinking about trying to keep everything in equal balance, you become very frustrated, and more importantly, you start to think in terms of trade-offs rather than, and this is a big point I want to try to make in this next half hour in our conversation together, rather than in terms of creating harmony or integration or looking for ways to figure out, and everybody can do this, how you can bring together the different parts of your life, your work and your family and your community, your friends, neighbors, social groups, religious groups, etc., and your private life, your mind, your body, your spirit. How you can bring those together in a way that works for all the different parts. Most people think in terms of trading one for the other, but when you do that, you lose sight of the possibilities which exist all around you if you just look for them, for bringing together the different parts of life in a way that works for all of them. And that's what we're going to be exploring today. How do you do that? How do you pursue what I call these four-way wins? Things that you can do under your control that you don't have to ask a lot of permission for, that enable you to make things better, not just for you, not just for your family, not just for your community, not just for your work, but for all of them. And balance when you think in terms of balance, you're only thinking of what you have to give up in order to get something in the other parts of your life. And I'm going to ask you instead to think about how to create mutual value or harmony or integration among the different parts. And there are some realistic and practical ways that you can do that, and that's what we'll be exploring here today.
In his work and his research, Stu has developed strategies to help people find the sweet spot where work and life integrate, and he offered us some tips for achieving what he calls a four-way win.
So, Lisa, you asked for an example of what a four-way win might look like?
Yeah, and what it would mean practically for those of us that are juggling so many things all at the same time. How can we practically expect to get that four-way win?
Yeah. Well, the three principles, and let's start with that. There's three basic principles. When we went out into the world and looked at men and women of all different ages and different levels and organizations to try to discover what does it take to bring together the different parts of life for mutual gain, we found that they follow these three principles, and that's what we're going to be talking about here today. To be real, which means to act with authenticity by clarifying what matters most to you. That's the first and most important thing. So you got to know what you care about, which is an obvious thing for me to say, but it's incredibly hard, actually, to be articulate and clear about what matters most to you in the different parts of your life. So that's the first principle, to be real. The second is to be whole, which means to respect and first recognize and respect that you've got these different parts of your life. Now, they may matter to you in different amounts, and at different times in your life they may matter. You know, your work might mean more to you than your family, for example, at some point, or vice versa, or your community, or your own spiritual development, or your own health. Not everything is equally important to everybody all the time. So knowing what's important, but then knowing who is important in the different parts of your life and why they're important to you. So being whole means to look at your life as a system of different roles that you play and to be thoughtful, be mindful, be conscious of who the critical people are and what their expectations are of you and what your expectations are of them, so that you can think creatively about how to manage those expectations and indeed how to find where there is compatibility between them. So like what do your kids expect of you that is consistent with what your friends and perhaps your employer expects of you? Where is there compatibility there and where is there conflict? So being real, being whole helps you to diagnose your life as a system that you can influence and then to come up with ideas for innovation. So that's the third principle, which is to be innovative, to act with creativity by continually experimenting with different ways of getting things done. And that might mean shifting the where and when and how you get things done. It might mean taking care of yourself in a way that enables you to be more available and healthy and focused for other people in your life and the different parts of your life. It might mean delegating something that you currently do that's good for somebody else to do and that frees you up to do things that matter more to you. There's 9 different kinds of experiments that I write about in the Total Leadership book and that you can find out more about on the website. But the key idea here is to be continually experimenting with things that you can do under your control, small things that enable you to make things better in all the different parts of life. So the big idea here in being real, being whole, being innovative is to diagnose and discover different ways of getting things done that allow you to better align what you care about with what you do every day. And what I've discovered in teaching this material and in sharing it with many different kinds of organizations all around the world is that anybody can do this if you think in terms of small steps that are good for you and for the people around you.
Getting to that four-way win starts with a simple exercise called the 4 circles. And Stu drew us a picture of how to map them out.
The 4 circles exercise, it's one of the favorite exercises of most people who approach this. It's really pretty simple. And we've actually got a free tool online where you can do this exercise, and it's sort of fun because you draw circles that have meaning to you. So we'll give you the website where you can do this in a few minutes when we wrap up. But what you do is you think about the 4 domains. So once again, those are your work or your career or school, that aspect of your life, however you think about it. Then there's your home or your family, however you define that. And of course, everyone listening has a slightly different definition of what family or home means to her. And then you've got community, so that's your friends, neighbors, social groups, religious groups, the environment around you. And then there's your private self, your mind, so your intellectual growth, your emotional health, and your body, your physical health, and your spirit. So those are the 4 domains. And so this exercise that helps you to figure out what matters really is pretty simple. You take 100 points and you divide them up according to those 4 different domains in terms of which is most important. So if everything's equally important to you, you'd say 25, 25, 25, 25. If family is everything and nothing else matters, well, then it would be 100 for family and 0 for the other 3. And everybody's different. So you enter into this very simple program, 100 points allocated however you want to the 4 domains, and the circles then become big or small depending on how many points you give them. Then you move the circles, and if you're on a touch screen, you can just move them, or you can click and drag them, and show the degree to which they overlap. So what does it mean for the circles to overlap? Well, that shows first, how important one is relative to the other, but then it also shows your degree of compatibility. How is what you're doing in your family consistent with what you do in your community in terms of the values that you represent, how people see you, what they think about you when they look at you and say, well, what does she stand for, really? What's really most important to her? And, your kids, when they look at you, what do they think? And, if you're working with other people in your work, what do they think? And then when you look in the mirror, are those values consistent or are they not? The goals that you're pursuing, are they consistent across the different parts or are they not? And so this then gives rise to questions and ideas about compatibility and conflict among the different domains in terms of what's really important. And in most cases, it starts to stimulate your thinking, fresh ideas about what you can do to bring the domains together so that it might look something closer to, the perfect center of a tree with all 4 domains in concentric circles perfectly aligned, which of course nobody's ever done, but it's a useful symbol, like a mandala, of how to bring together in harmony the different parts. So that's the 4 circles exercise, and I hope people check it out at my4circles.com, and you could also then share your circles with anybody you want through social media or not and get their feedback on your ideas.
Finally, we wrapped our conversation with a short Q&A during which Stu answered questions about how he set his own important boundaries and how to create your vision for what matters most.
Those are great strategies, and I have to tell you, we have a lot of questions that are coming in, but I actually have one right off the bat for you before we get to some of the other questions, which is, I know you've already explained to us who you are relative to our audience, but we would all love to know, how did you do it? I mean, you have kids, you have a busy career, you've certainly balanced these number of things. How did you manage it all?
Well, that's a great question. It's the long and short of it is that I have been. I think the most important thing that I've done, because I can't tell you my whole life story here, although I do write about that in the preface to the Total Leadership book. I say how I got up, how I got into this and developed it over time. But the most important principle is that be real idea. It's knowing what matters most to you and following your heart. And helping other people to see how you're doing that is going to be good for them as well as for you. And then if those, if the people around you are not able to support you, or if they're not able to, believe in you and what it is that you're trying to get done, well, then it might mean changing those relationships or perhaps ending them. So over the course of my 62 years, there have been a number of relationships that I've had to let go of because they didn't fit with who I was becoming. So it's knowing what matters and knowing who matters and following your heart, which basically means when you discover something that you care a lot about, that you really believe in and that you can't stop thinking about, whatever that is, taking your special gift, whatever that might be, and trying to make it useful for other people. That's what I've been doing. And I've been lucky enough to have discovered something, like with the arrival of my son, the picture of which you saw, and focused so much of my energy and attention on that, and tried to make it useful for other people, that I've had support for spending time on that. So it's knowing what matters to you, and then helping other people to see how what you're trying to do is good for them. I know I'm speaking here in generalities, but the key is to have the courage, I think, of your convictions, to know what you care about, and then to be unafraid to say to yourself, oh, this is what I care about. It may not be what my parents want me to focus on. It may not be what my employer wants me to focus on, but I got to figure out a way to make this happen. So how am I going to do that? And that's really been key for me, is to be unafraid to look at what I am most passionate about, and then to be creative about trying to make that happen in my life, step by step, learning from my mistakes.
So I actually have one question from somebody, which was really interesting, because you're talking about essentially following your passion, which is really important, but I think people are still wondering, how do you follow that passion? Where do you start? We had one person who asked the question, can you give us, you talk about small steps toward big goals. Can you talk about some specific priorities, some specific ways to do that?
Well, sure. So, one simple way to think about it is, and these exercises in the book help you to do just this. One exercise that I find to be really valuable is writing your vision of the future that you'd like to create. So, here's the task. It's pretty simple, actually. You think about 15 years from now, so it's 2030. You wake up, and what happens? Who are you with? What do you do throughout the day? And, this is the key question, what's the impact that you're having on the people around you, on the world?
Okay.
In your small way. And you write that down. And then you share it with other people. And this is a marvelously rich window into what you care about today. So it's not an action plan. It's not a chart that says, okay, I got to do this, and then this, and then this, and then this, and this. It's not that at all. It's a compelling image of an achievable future. And to be a leader in any context requires that you have some sense of vision or purpose that inspires you and helps you to inspire other people. So that's one exercise I would encourage everybody to do if you haven't ever done it, and most people haven't. And then to figure out how you can share that with other people and get their reaction, and then revise it again. Because the clearer you are about where it is that you want to go, what does that mountain look like, and what's it going to be like when I get up there? You need that as a source of inspiration and a way to provide direction for action, which also helps you to determine what you should avoid doing as much as what you should be doing to take those small steps to get up that mountain.
Okay, that's really helpful in terms of framing it in the big goal inside with the small steps. We actually are getting so many questions. I have another one for you that's really interesting. We have one listener who asks, how do you deal with people, whether it's coworkers or even family members, kids, partner, relatives, who don't respect your boundaries?
That's a great question, and a lot of people struggle with that, of course. And so what I encourage people to do, if you've got people others in your life who are intruding, and this is something that I'm sometimes guilty of too, is the critical importance of clarifying your expectations of each other. So one thing you might try is, let's say it's one particular person who just interrupts you when you don't want to be. You can explain that that you need to be uninterrupted for this period of time in order to be able to do the things that matter to that other person. So again, anything that you want to try differently, like to create a physical boundary or a time boundary, a space or time boundary. You want to explain, like, here's something I'd like to try. So for the next month, boss, what I'd like to try is, during the hours of 3 to 5 p.m., I shut my door and nothing comes through it unless I open it. Because I think that's going to make me a lot more productive, and you're going to see real results in terms of, better productivity, however you measure it, or whatever the results are that your boss cares about. So what I'd like to do is try maybe 2 days a week from 3 to 5 p.m., I shut the door. So can we try that for the next few weeks and see if indeed I don't get better results for you as a result of my doing that? And if it doesn't work, well, then we'll go back to the open door. You can interrupt me anytime you want, or maybe we'll try something different. Would you be willing to try that? And what I found, so that's just one idea. And you just think about how you might apply that in your own setting, but try setting a boundary as an experiment where the people around you are going to benefit from it. Right. And then let them see whether or not that benefit is obtained. And if not, keep adjusting. What do you think?
I think it's worth a try. I think we've all been there, and any strategies that we can get to help us get over that hurdle.
It's all about trying, and that's what this principle of being innovative is all about. It's small experiments where everyone's you believe in your heart and in your mind that what you're doing is going to be good not just for you but for them. If it's just for you, forget it. It's not going to work, right. And that's the problem with work-life balance. It's I need to be home to take care of my kids because they are complaining and they need me and me. If it's all about me and you go to your boss wanting something that's all about you, forget it. When I first got to Ford Motor Company in 1999 as the head of leadership development, where I spent 2.5 years on leave from Wharton, and I'd just written a book, Work and Family, Allies or Enemies, and it published Harvard Business Review articles about work and life. The team I inherited, they all came to me and said, okay, here are the things that I need to be, you're Mr. Work Life, here are all the things that I need for my life. And I'm like, whoa, wait a minute. You're here to serve me in this company. What are you going to do that's going to make things good for you and for me? It can't just be about you.
Well, it's so interesting because one of the questions, and this may be the last question we have time for that just came through, and this is such an interesting question. You talk a lot about making things better for, doing things that will make things better for, not just for you, but for other people. We have somebody who asked, to most women, it's a challenge to have a vision or purpose outside of their family. And the vision is naturally tied to playing a critical role in raising their children and their families. What do you advise people to help change that? I mean, that is a really tricky thing. I think it's very true.
Well, if that's what it is, then that's what it is. I try not to make any judgment about other people's values and vision, and it's hard to do that because, of course, I have my own. But it's really important to be candid with yourself about what you care about. And if all that you really see yourself as, achieving in your world is raising healthy children, well, then I applaud you and want to help you because that's really important. There's not many more things that are more important in this world than to be able to do that. So I wouldn't diminish that as an aspiration. I would, celebrate it if that's what matters. The key is to know what you care about and to resist the pressure, and this is the hard part, that you feel from society, from people around you who want you to be more or different than what you want to be. So that vision should be whatever it is that you want it to be. But I can tell you this, if it's just about you and your own self-aggrandizement and enrichment, if your vision is just about, bigger house, bigger, vacations, stuff like that, nobody really cares. Nobody cares about that. What people care about is what you're going to do to help other people in some way. And if that's your children, well, great. Why does that have to be?
The important thing is your passion. I mean, what you really feel strongly about, and unapologetically. I mean, there are a lot of women out there who are very passionate about their careers, and they should be unapologetic about that.
Well, yeah, what people admire and respect and trust in others is if you, and this is a central theme and a good note for us to close on, I think, in terms of the 6 cases that I wrote about in Leading the Life You Want. What comes through and what I write about in the last chapter is this: these people have taken something that they have developed over the course of their lives. Maybe they were born with it, maybe they cultivated it, and they've made it useful for other people. And that's what makes them strong. That's what makes them, effective in the world. That they're taking what's unique to them and making it useful to others. And so that really must be a part of an effective leadership vision. It can't just be about you. It has to be in some way serving, taking your life, what is meaningful and distinct about you, and making it useful to other people.
I want to say thanks again to Stu for joining us. In case you missed it, you can follow Stu on Twitter at Stu Friedman, that's at STEW Friedman, or get more information about his books and radio show by visiting his website at totalleadership.org. If you like what you heard today, get more of our podcast by subscribing. And while you're downloading, let us know what you thought, or give us a share. Thanks to everyone for being here. We look forward to seeing you next time as we help make the work-life equation add up.